Hi, my name's James O'Neill, doing this video from Cornwall, United Kingdom. This video is going to be called The Voice of God is Silent. And how this came about is I got talking to a guy last night in the steam room sauna. Go to the leisure centre, and so youngest guy, 31, and so he's just talking. So the conversation went to work, like that's what guys do. So he's in construction, from a family that always did construction. He does a bit of building work, and he lives in a van. So he'll live in a van for the spring and the summer, and then he'll go away for the winter. Things like that. So he's got that lifestyle, and then he's been settled in a house with. He's been in a relationship a couple of times. They've broken down. So you're talking about that. And then the conversation goes on to the spiritual and stuff, like, because just two guys talking, why not? And I'm dead open and dead honest. So when I'm like talking about something, it's not that I'm backing it up. I'm like saying, well, you know, this is how it is with me, you know. So we get talking spirit. So I'm dead open now because I don't really care what people think. It's gone past that stage now. It's the way the world is. If you think you can sort the world out with politics, go for it. If you can think you can sort the world out with religion, go for it. Or if you can think, how do I sort my world out? Well, the politicians aren't going to help you. The religions aren't going to help you. So who can help you? Well, it's only you. So you have no power as an individual, or very little. It's limited. But then there's that inner voice that's accessible if you take the time. God won't come and interfere in your life, but there are exceptions to that where God does intervene in people's lives, and that's for a reason. But God will meet you halfway. If you inquire about God, just scratching me leg. If you inquire about God, like your thoughts, you will be met by something. Something will meet you. You're not hitting a barrier, you're hitting a source of information within you. So what people do is, because they don't want to take the responsibility that is the voice of God, the influence of God, they just put it down to themselves figuring it out. And a lot of time people do figure it out, because the more knowledge you get of life, you do figure things out yourself. But these end times where you need that bit of guidance, that bit of help, as though God is your big brother. God is your parent. A true parent, because now there's a lot of selfish parents. We see that, you know, parents who kill the children, beat them up, let the boyfriend torture them, things like that, you know. But a true parent would move heaven and earth to help their child, to the limit of their power, the limit of their knowledge. So we got talking, and I said, like, yeah, I talk to God. Like, I talk to spirit, and I say spirit, and that, but I talk to God. God talks to me. Well, how do you hear that? So the conversation went, he basically said to me, well, what does the voice sound like? So I had to think about it, because I've never really explained that. I have, but not in a one video where I can say this is the definitive answer. I've talked to God, I know I have, and I've had God talk to me. I've asked questions and I've got answers. So if you went to a shrink and lay on a couch, you'd say, well, that answer came from the depths of you, you know, your knowledge, your mind in the background. You know, it came forward from the background of your mind. Whereas no, it's not, because sometimes you haven't got that knowledge. You just haven't got it. So how do I describe the voice of God? How does it speak? Does it speak in a feminine voice, a masculine voice? Well, no. How does you... So I had to think about it. So then I went and got changed or whatever, and he was in. So I'm thinking about it, and I'm like, thinking to myself, yeah, I know how to explain it now. The voice of God is silent. And I can explain it because a year ago, I'm not saying I couldn't have done it, but it just never rose up. It never came up. Whereas this guy last night, He didn't provoke me, but he instigated me thinking about how do I describe the voice of God when God talks to me, so that I can share it with you, so that then you can think about, has God been talking to you and have you been ignoring God? Or is that voice that you hear, is it God? And you're just at that stage of deciding. So, how I'll describe it is, how does your voice sound in your head? If like now, if you count to 10, but you say the first five out loud, and then you say the last five in your mind. So it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I've just done 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 in my head. Now the voice in my head doesn't sound like me. And it's silent. You can't hear it. And it's a totally different voice from me. Sometimes when I re-listen to my voice, I think, oh Jesus, do I talk like that? It's like when I hear them brothers, especially Liam, Oasis, I think, oh fucking hell, they're from Manchester, oh God. But the voice in my head doesn't sound anything like me, and it's also silent. So what accent does God have? Does God have a Rasta accent? Does God have a French accent? A London accent? A Liverpool accent? So God doesn't sound like me. God doesn't have a Manchester accent. Doesn't have an English accent. It's just this silent voice in my head. Like my voice is silent in my head. When I finish that counting, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Test it yourself, and then that'll provoke your thinking, and you'll start to understand what I'm saying. So I'll give you a couple of stories of how things have developed with me, and then you'll understand there isn't a voice, they are silent words. Silent meaning there's no accent, there's just no accent. It's silence. It's words within the silence within your mind. Just like when I just did 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. They are words within the silence of my mind. So, first one time when it started me thinking, but I still didn't accept it was God. I knew I was getting inspiration from somewhere. It's like building sites. I'd turn up at a building site. There was one time where I turned up and the site manager says, no, we've got no jobs. And as I was just about to walk out, the contracts manager walked in. He was visiting the site. I just happened to be there those few seconds that the contracts manager walked in. So he said, all right. So he said, yeah. So I said, oh, I've just asked the agent for a job. He's not got any, which, pity, but I've left my phone number. He says, Wilmslow tomorrow morning. He said, I've got an house there for you to start. I said, all right, thanks very much. You see, I got inspiration. I was driving back from somewhere, and this little inner voice, this silent voice, these words in my head, said, try here. And it was a site near me that I'd never been on, because it didn't look like my type of work, and I didn't really want to work there. Didn't like the houses, I didn't like the setup, from driving past. But the voice, the silent words, the words with no accent, that you can't describe, these words came in my head that said, call in there. And it just happened to be those split seconds. Now, other things that did happen that morning, got me to there at that time. Because God sees everything. God's not a chancer. God plans everything. So God slowed me down. God speeded me up here. And God slowed me down again. And then got me back to Winningshaw. And then just got me at that point to turn in. Now, if God had done that 5 minutes earlier, I'd have missed that contracts manager. I just needed to catch him at the door. So that's one part. But one of the strange ones is football. I got that way. I couldn't watch England. I'm not going to watch a World Cup game. Because to me, the football season is all the clubs that play. This World Cup now is out of sync. It's not right. It's wrong. The energy of it is wrong. Everything about it is wrong. The corruption, everything that's wrong with the world, the moral corruption, the financial corruption, the hypocrisy, it's all wrapped up in this World Cup. So I'm not going to watch it. Why should I? I'll only sit there muttering to myself. Well, years ago, I had to stop watching England in the pub. I couldn't go watch England in the pub because I used to get dead fucking angry and I'd like be going off and like argue. Somebody said to me, "I'd fucking you what? You can't see that." And I used to get headaches because I used to get so angry. So I started watching England at home and I was still getting angry. I was shouting at the telly. But at least I wasn't bothering anybody and I wasn't in danger of getting in a fight or anything, you know what I mean, or a big row. So this one night I'm watching England and Portugal. It was the European Championships. So I'm watching England and Portugal. And David Beckham, they're playing from right to left. David Beckham was out on the right wing and he was shit. And the reason he was shit is because he was injured. He was carrying an injury. And Sven kept playing him. And Sven kept playing him because the sponsors wanted Beckham on the pitch. Beckham on the subs bench, or Beckham not playing that game at all because of his injury, wasn't worth anything to the sponsors. They needed a picture of Beckham, or they needed the influence of Beckham on that field for their products. All their products. Beckham was the main money man. Well, they got Sven Eriksson because he was the man that would facilitate putting the player on the field for them sponsors. He was a sponsor-friendly manager. And the England FA need money because they get a cut of it. The England FA need money to pay the debt off Wembley. The English FA borrowed £700 million to build Wembley. They've got a debt as big as the Glaziers. And they've got to pay it off. That's why they changed the rules of the football, holding the semi-finals at a neutral ground. That's why they devised this system of 2 up, 2 down, and then 4 play for the third place, and 4 play for the one comes down. But they have that promotion where 4 have got to play for the third place, and they play at Wembley in the finals. It's all corrupt. It's all about money for Wembley to pay off the debt. Now, if I go to that in the pub, I used to get angry. So anyway, so I'm watching England and Portugal. Beckham is injured and Beckham is doing nothing because he's protecting himself out on the right wing doing fuck all. He's doing nothing. Then all of a sudden, now imagine me, I'm sat in the room, I've got no lights on, I've got the telly on, I'm sat there silent watching, but I'm muttering away in my head. And all of a sudden Beckham started playing halfway through the second half. He started getting involved, he started tackling, he started passing, he started going past people, he was doing long balls, he was doing everything that he should have done for the previous 60, 70 minutes. And all of a sudden, in my head, silently, I didn't say it out loud because I'm on my own. In my head, quietly, I said, I wonder why he's playing now. That's what I said in my head. But in that voice with no accent. I heard myself in my head say it. So in my head, I wonder why he's playing now. What's going on? And then this voice just came. These words, these silent words came in my head. And said, answered me because he's playing because there's only one substitute left. Sven had made his 3 subs or 2 subs, whatever it was then. There was only 1 sub left to come on, and Beckham was playing that. He was such an insignificant player in that game. He knew he was in danger of being subbed, and Sven couldn't have opted out of it. It had been forced on him that the sub to come on would have to replace Beckham. Well, Beckham worked it out, and he worked it out not from a football point of view. He worked it out from a financial point of view. He had to keep his sponsors happy. Not the fans. He had to keep his... So he had to make sure he didn't get... So for 20 minutes, he risked his injury. For 55, 60 minutes, he protected that injury. And then for 10, 15 minutes, he risked everything. And he got involved in everything. So then Sven called on the substitute and he took off Steven Gerrard. Took Steven Gerrard off in midfield. And as soon as that sub came on, Beckham was safe. And Beckham went back to protecting his injury and doing fuck all. He was safe. So his sponsors, his deal was safe. His influence within the financial world was safe. But my point is, I asked the question. I was definitely puzzled. I didn't know the answer. I saw such a change in my head. I just went, why is he suddenly playing? And then this silent voice came in my head and said, because there's only one substitute left. And that was the perfect answer. It was short. It was concise. It was the perfect answer in just a few words. And it covered everything. But I also got a load of information pushed into my head. Because that's sometimes that happens with you with God. That silent voice of God. God will say a few words, but then all of a sudden you feel this information pouring into you like an encyclopedia, like the Matrix. So this was before I took the responsibility, because it is a responsibility to accept that there is a creator and God's as good a word as any. And it doesn't mean I'm religious. So this was before. So this was like, but it tied in with lots of things that had happened with me. So I don't know what year it was England played Portugal, but it all backfired on Beckham, didn't it? Because was it the quarterfinals or the semi-finals where they played Portugal and it was a draw? Again, he didn't do fuck all. But then when it came to the penalties, he took that penalty and he tried to do it in such a way it'd make a really good photograph for the back pages. And he leaned over, so he got an angle. Instead of just... And he fell, didn't he? And the ball fucking went like that. And he tried to blame the turf. He said the turf gave way under him. No, he was doing it in such a dickhead way. He embarrassed himself, so it backfired on him. He did exactly the same in Mexico. He was injured again in Mexico in the World Cup. Was it Ronaldinho? That player he's got a bit of teeth, the Brazilian player in the game with Brazil. He went in to tackle him on... Ronaldinho had just crossed the halfway line from the right. The ball was bouncing, and Beckham and Ronaldinho both run at it, and it was a 50-50 ball. But you had to be aggressive to get that ball. Well, Beckham pulled out to protect his knee or his ankle again. You actually saw him pull out the tackle. He didn't put 100% in. He put 40% in. Ronaldinho put 100% in, got the ball, it went past Beckham. Ronaldinho took a couple of steps from just past the halfway line and launched it over the head of David Seaman, who was also injured. But he wanted to stay on the pitch because he had sponsors. He was doing hair gel or something. He was just starting to get into the world of money. David Seaman didn't say to Sven, listen, my back's gone, rest me up for a game, put the reserve goalie in, because you got one reserve, two reserve goalies. David Seaman did not think of England. David Beckham did not think of England. They were thinking of themselves, and that's how rotten football is. But anyway, the silent voice. So that was one of my experiences. So, fast forward a couple of years later, I'm having a load of trouble with Mrs. I've left her. I've left the situation. That's a better way of saying it. I've left the situation, and it's a pity. I've had to leave my kids. But it was either that or fucking kill her. Eventually. And there's a good chance I'd have killed her. There's a good chance I'd have strangled her just to shut her up. That'd have been the limit of my logic. So I come home from work one day and it's September. And I'm on this job. Now the job you have in September as a bricklayer, it's really got to last you to Christmas. You're not bothered really after Christmas, but it's got to last you to Christmas. You don't want to be looking for a job in late October, November, early December. You don't want to be looking for a job because the chances of you finding a decent job are fucking few and far between. You want to be on a site where you're there for up to Christmas because you've got Christmas responsibilities. And I'd booked for a holiday for my daughters to take them to Malta in January. I'd paid for the holiday. I had £500 saved up, middle of September, towards spending money. So it was looking okay, but I was on a bit of a dodgy job, shitty job. Dodgy site agent, dodgy contracts manager. So I had to bite my tongue a lot of the times to keep the job. Anyway, one day it's raining, so I come home early, and I'm sat there reading the paper, and I put the paper down. All of a sudden, this voice just said, "Go to church, there's going to be trouble in January." But this was slightly different. This energy filled me. And it filled the room. And this voice, as clear as a bell, said, "Go to church, there's going to be trouble in January." This is mid-September. So I sat back. And again, the voice had no sound. It's a silent voice within your head. There's no accent, there's no nothing. It's like when you think, as I say, if you count to 5 in your mind, it's silent. But the words are there. You can hear them. So go to church, it's going to be trouble in January. So I sat back and I thought, right, I was now at a stage where this had been happening too often. And this was somebody warning me for my good. Somebody, it's like your parents, when your parents as a child, they tell you things for your good. To protect you, to save you, to help you through life. They don't want to see you hurt. And that emotion, like, was there, but it was a sensible voice. Go to church, there's going to be trouble in January. Not you have to go to church. You go to church, there's going to be trouble in January. So that gives you the free will. I had the free will to ignore that voice. So I sat back, bricklayer. I'm about 36 years old. And I'm there and I sat there and I just thought, that's God, that. And it's the first time I accepted it was God. So I've now got this, well, which church do we go to? Do we go to a Catholic church, Protestant church? Do I go and sit in the aisles of a church while the priest, get the wafer and a bit of wine and all that, and go through the sermon and all that and sing the songs? And I thought, nah. And then I sat and I thought about it and I thought, spiritualist church. I'll go to a spiritualist church where you get a medium who gives messages. And I thought, that's what... Anyway, it took me a couple of weeks and I found one basically on my doorstep. Wednesday night. Perfect night. I'd have all the hassle of the weekend if she was letting me see the kids or whatever. Then I'd have a bit of work on this site that had a fucking dodgy feel about it. The site agent and that. I've got the stress of I've got to save money up for this holiday for my daughters. So Wednesday was a perfect night. It was the middle of the week and it de-stressed me. And I used to just go sit and think. I never once got a message from Spirit. All the way up to Christmas. Never got a message. But I'll tell you what else happened. I stopped making money on that job. It all went tits up. Everything that could go wrong went wrong. The spitefulness of the site agent and that. Dodgy. Other gangs like sorting out their work there, better in with the agent. It all went wrong. List as long as my arm things. The guys I work with shit on me. They fucked off. They went back somewhere, it's like, long story. They got me there, actually. They came onto the building site where I said, Jimmy, I didn't really know him, but I got on well with the labourer. I used to joke with him on site. And they left, and then they came and got me to go with them on this site. He said, oh, it's a great site, this and that. So I like jacked the job I was in. It was a good job. And I went there, and then next thing you know is they jacked in and went back to where I'd come from. And I'm there left building this fucking four bedroom house on my own with a double garage. On my own. And it was only up to waist height when they left. And I had to finish a 4-bed house, what we'd been doing, on my own with no labourer. All before Christmas. The stress I was under. So that church, what God had told me to go to, that I decided to go to after hearing the voice saying go to church, and it felt right, the right choice, because when I sat there thinking about it, obviously God is observing my thoughts, because God can hear your thoughts. I'll explain why shortly. So it was the perfect day, the perfect church. I stopped making money, and I still only had 500. I never saved another penny from the middle of September. I never added to that £500. Christmas, I couldn't buy my kids Christmas presents because the previous year I'd bailed out my brother who'd been shot, and I gave him like 7-8 grand. In yesterday's video I said 9 grand. That's to wind him up if he ever sees it. But I basically gave him 7-8 grand. And I left myself with nothing. So I had to work from nothing. From zero. And then when this job went tits up, it ended up I couldn't buy my kids Christmas presents. Because they had this holiday coming up. And I actually finished the job 10 days before Christmas. So it all finished. It all went tits up. It went tits on tits on tits up. I was actually going to beat up the contracts manager. Threaten the site agent proper, and the contracts manager, like I told him straight, I said, if you take a fucking penny, I'm going to come back here and I'm going to beat you to a fucking pulp. If you take a penny off my final wage when you pay me up, oh well, we've got to do this, we've got to do. I said, I'm telling you straight, I will fucking beat you to a fucking pulp. Anyway, they paid me. So God was looking out for me. January, took my kids away. We went away between Christmas and New Year. Gets back, my fucking car's been seized because it had no road tax on it. My van. I couldn't afford road tax on my van. While I was away on holiday, they come and took it away. And then it kicked off with my missus and she stopped me, couldn't see the kids again. Something happened. I was only back 2 days and I took one of my daughters home and something happened and that was it. It was gone. It's over. Didn't see my kids again for 4 years, even though they only live round the corner. So you see, God looks out for you. So that voice, what you may hear that you ignore, is your best friend. That voice loves you without limit. And that God wants, that voice, that silent voice wants the best for you. And that voice, that silent voice, has a plan for you. But you have the free will to not listen. So it is very important to try and understand that voice. And the thing is, you'll make mistakes, you'll misinterpret things, but you learn by your mistakes, as with everything in life. As with everything. If you're a bricklayer, you don't read the drawing right and you put a window in the wrong place. You've learnt by your mistake. Well, you learn by your mistakes of misinterpreting the voice or putting too much into it. Sometimes you think there's more than what was said. Like I say, that silent voice will say it as simple as they come. Like with Beckham, it said, there's only one substitute left. That's all it said. But it covered everything. And then the information was piled into my head. So it is important to analyse that other voice. So then how do you distinguish between your thoughts that are actually your thoughts where, you know, you think to yourself, oh, why is that happening? And then the answer comes, well, yeah, from your subconscious it can come. So that you then have to learn what's the difference between your subconscious and the silent voice. The words from the silent voice. Well, you've just got to fucking work hard at it. You've just got to stick at it. And if you've watched my videos, you've just got to learn to laugh at yourself when you make mistakes. Don't take yourself too serious. Like, here I am, I'm like council estate bricklayer from Winnishot, and I would quite openly talk about God because I don't take myself too serious. I did do years ago, maybe. Because you do. Because you think you can save the world. And that's one of the things. It's like my book. My book can save the world. If everybody stops voting, I'm telling you now, that will cause such an upheaval on this planet, a spiritual upheaval. It will cause a spiritual upheaval if everybody suddenly realise that God wants us to stop voting. But God also doesn't want us to go into the churches, the mosque, any place of organised worship that has any link to politics, the politicised religions. God wants us to abandon politics. God wants us to abandon. It's not going to happen, is it? Well, I thought there was a possibility when God got me to write it up. Can you imagine me writing a book from a silent voice in my head? I'm coming down the stairs in 2005. But God had initiated me back going 2 weeks before. God needed me immobilised. My lad's like 10 months old. 10 months old. He's just a baby. I could hardly pick him up. I just got up one morning, my back had gone, and I had to stop work. Because I was working. And after 2 weeks, I think it's about a week, I was in the garden, and I've moved in with her, so we've got the lad. We've had that stressful year where a woman who couldn't have a baby, God told me she was going to have a baby to me, even though she couldn't have children. So you see, that voice, from that first instance, I'd built up to the stages where I sat there and I said to God, why am I with her? And instantly the answer came back, she's going to have your baby. It was as simple as that. And then a load of information was poured into my head again. And then I moved in with her about 6 weeks later. And then 14 months later, we walked in with a baby. Walked in with a baby boy. I had £8 worth of petrol in the petrol tank, and I had no money. Because what money I'd had was just enough to get me to fetching that baby home. But we had a fridge full of food, and we had 2 weeks before we got any money. We were broke, but we had a baby. And we had a fridge full of food. £8 of petrol, that'll get you around the estate. I'm not looking for a job. I hadn't looked for a job. I hadn't worked in them 14 months. Because I said to her, my time is for us until you can have a baby. Saying that to a woman who cannot have a baby. But God had told me, that silent voice. And I had enough confidence to believe it because God never let me down. In all the time before, God never let me down. I let myself down, but God never let me down. That silent voice. So I could tell you loads and loads of these stories, but you have to take on board what I'm saying and figure it out yourself, because this is the thing. God talks to you, within you. So why do we listen to people who say that they are talking on behalf of God? That's why we've got to dump the religions, the politicised religions. In my book I say, yeah, you can have centres, wellness centres, where people help each other and people go to talk. But you can't have a religion where you have to follow their instructions because they are talking to you on behalf of God. It's like the Pope. The Pope is God's representative on earth. That position, should I say. God's representative. Loads of bollocks. God is within every one of us. Because I've told it before where I've had the voice explain to me and show me. God showed me God. And if you imagine a fluid in motion, And all of a sudden a little bit breaks away. Like a lava lamp. You have a lava lamp where it breaks away. You have the great big lump and then it breaks away into bits. Well, if you imagine God as a fluid in motion, and then all of a sudden this tiny bit breaks away, well, that's the soul that enters the baby. A piece of God enters every baby. And that's the I am. That is God within every one of us. That's why God is in our thoughts, aware of our thoughts. Because God is within each of us. And when we finish this life, when this body is over, our personality, everything about us is gone, is dead. That little bit of God, the essence, goes back to God and takes with it us, who we were. So every human being that has existed is now a part of God. Every human being that has existed. Every human being that will exist in the future will come from God. The religions won't tell you that. And between that little bit of God's journey into the soul of the baby, and then when we die, and it goes back, between then, it's between you and God. It's not between us and the Pope, us and the rabbi, us and the mullah. So that's why abortion is a tricky subject. In my book I write about abortion, and I say the whole thing about abortion hurts every single person. Hurts everybody. If people truly understood the essence of God that departs from God, breaks away, a little speck breaks away, and then the baby becomes spiritually aware. I've told you about the time where she's pregnant, like I've moved in with her, she's finally pregnant. You know, it's happened when it's meant to happen. The woman that can't get pregnant is pregnant. She's sat on the sofa. I'm sat on the other sofa. The TV's on. I'm not really watching it. I'm like in my own thoughts. I'm talking to the voice. And, you know, I'm trying to, because I've got all this responsibility going on in my head. Because I used to take too much responsibility upon myself. Whereas now, I'm a fucking bit more laid back about it. I don't take myself too serious. So I used to be always worried and used to always be talking to myself in my head. Sometimes it'd be me, sometimes it would be the voice. And then all of a sudden, the lights are on low. It's like, you know, we've got a lamp on or something. And you look over and there's a moment where, there's lots of moments when a woman's pregnant where they just look absolutely beautiful in that motherhood mode. You know, they're there with the big belly, they feel unattractive, but they look beautiful to you. There's lots of moments like that. And I just looked across at her in that moment. She's watching telly, and I looked at her and I just thought, in my mind, my silent voice said, interesting. Within her, there's a baby growing. And as I thought that, all of a sudden, my baby came and said hello to me. And said, I'm here. So that essence of God had just entered my baby. At that moment, I thought that. So I've just looked at her and thought, wow, imagine baby, you know, the miracle of baby growing within her, in her belly. And as I said that in my head, straight away, the spirit, the soul of my baby boy came and introduced himself and said, I'm here. And I looked across at her, and as I looked across at her, I thought, how can I tell her that? What's just happened to me? And as I'm thinking that, all of a sudden she went, oh, he's just kicked. And it was his first kick. We can't all have these experiences, but each individual person will have their own experiences that slowly show them that God is real. But God is within us because God's listening to everything we think. And God initiates your thoughts sometimes. God provokes your thoughts. What you think is you is actually a little provocation from God to set you thinking. And then all of a sudden you're off on a tangent and you're away and you're thinking something, and you then become aware of knowledge. And what this guy said last night was very interesting, because he was talking about his past relationship, and he said what he's done is he's broke himself down, he's ripped himself to pieces, he's dismantled himself to see where he went wrong in his relationships, and was it. And he's been honestly critical of himself. And I've said many times, that's one of the most important things you've got to do. You've got to dismantle yourself. And why am I here? It's like, why was I homeless? Why was I living in my car? Why did my second relationship break up? Why did my first... So you dismantle yourself, as in like... And some people have put the blame all on themselves. But eventually you just have to accept it was never going to work. Well, what could I have done better? Well, there's nothing you could have done better, because you've dismantled yourself. Yeah, there was things you did wrong, but you really couldn't have done better. So you had to dismantle yourself to be a better human being. And once you start doing that, you actually make yourself more accessible to that silent voice. Because that silent voice, God, will be helping you, even though you're not aware of it. If you're at that stage where you're just not aware of that silent voice, what you call inspirational thought is actually that silent voice of God. So yeah, God doesn't have an accent. Yeah, man, I'm God. Unless God wants to do that. That's up to God. There's no golden rule. In my book I say God's golden rule is there are no golden rules. Yeah, you've got to be a decent person and all that, but then sometimes you think, why is that fucking horrible bastard doing well in life? Well, there's no golden rule. God will get around to teaching that person a lesson in their own time. In God's time, should I say. So, yeah. The voice of God is silent.